Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Chancellor's Roundtable discussion on Alexander Hamilton and his influence on contemporary American politics. My name is Vivek Shah, and I am the co-chair of the Vanderbilt University Speakers Committee. Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing Professor Alice Randall and Chancellor Zeppos, and thank them for sharing their expertise and opinions on Alexander Hamilton and his continuing inspiration to our country. First, I would like to introduce Chancellor Nicholas S. Zeppos. Chancellor Z is a 5-time recipient of the Best Professor Award in the law school. Over the past decade, he has taught a very popular undergraduate history course on the Federalist Papers. Long before the phenomenal success of Hamilton, the musical, he has engaged students in classroom discussions and capstone projects on the historical writings of Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, in sharing his considerable knowledge of America's founding fathers with generations of students. Please join me in welcoming Vanderbilt's chief resident Hamiltonian scholar, Chancellor Zeppos. Professor Alice Randall is a Harvard-educated novelist, a producer of screenplays, and an award-winning songwriter. We are proud to have Professor Randall at Vanderbilt as a writer-in-residence in African American and Diaspora Studies. She serves as faculty head of Stambaugh House on the Ingram Commons, and invitations to her creative events are highly coveted amongst first-year students. Professor Randall is the author of The Wind Done Gone, Pushkin and the Queen of Spades, Rebel Yell, and Ada's Rules. With her daughter, Caroline Randall Williams, Professor Randall co-authored an acclaimed cookbook, Soul Food Love, and the young adult novel, The Diary of B.B. Bright, Possible Princess, winner of the Phyllis Wheatley Award. Professor Randall, it is an honor to have you with us tonight.
Oh, like the microphone kiss.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed tonight's discussion.
Thank you so much. Well, Alice, it's really just great to be with you tonight on, such a wonderful night to have a visitor come to campus. And obviously we're going to be talking about the founding of the country, we the people, who's included, who's not included, and it's really a privilege to spend this day after so much tumult and so much building up to this election. And so, let me just kind of start a conversation with you about Hamilton, Vanderbilt, maybe what I'm kind of feeling today. And so I came in to my office, and beautiful fall day on a college campus. You could take pictures of the trees and the leaves, and I saw my staff, wonderful staff. I don't know if any of them are here, but I have a number of very talented people, very diverse, women of color, single mothers, a lesbian who's married and enjoying that freedom. I then walked across campus. I had a meeting, and I was walking across the Rand Terrace, and back and forth across the campus, I saw people of many faiths and many races, and the socioeconomic diversity as well that we strive for. I then walked back and I ran into Jane Landers and Dan Sharfstein, my professors, and they were with a group of students. They were going over to Fisk, and they were going to do some research with their students on Nashville at Fisk. They were with a woman from Brazil who had just experienced the election as well, and she was talking to me about their election and impeachment. There were 2 women of color. There was a young student from Japan. So as I kind of walked across the campus, if I just thought to myself, I said, well, this is a work in progress, but it's a kind of a vision of Vanderbilt that we would want to say we're striving toward more inclusive, more equitable, more diverse, more global, that we see talent everywhere, and that opportunity has to be truly equal.
Absolutely.
I sat on this stage 6 weeks ago. I think you were probably here, where Perry Wallace and Godfrey Dillard spoke to a packed room on breaking barriers. And there was a lot of discussion, and there was a lot of, I would say, hope and really wonderment from Perry, who survived and succeeded, and Godfrey, who left and went north. But then, I started getting a sense of people overtaken with a sense of fear, or am I really welcomed, and am I part of the community, even on our campus? And, I started really thinking hard about, this project that we're kind of undertaking at Vanderbilt to call, what is we the people at Vanderbilt? What is that community of a more perfect union? And I'm a big believer in the power of education. I'm the big believer in the fights for the right to vote. I've become, maybe in my old age, a person of choosing love, choosing sometimes painful courage, and the privilege of learning. And I think those are all kind of, in many people's minds, powerfully on the table right now.
Absolutely.
And so we have Hamilton. And I have to confess, I've always been a Hamiltonian. I mean, when I was in college, I was like, it's about Hamilton. It's not about Jefferson. It's not about Jackson. Shouldn't say that in Tennessee. But yet, there was something that captured me about this immigrant coming from the Caribbean who was an illegitimate, got a scholarship to go to college, and had this vision that was very different. And then there's Jefferson, and we'll have Jefferson and Lafayette join us soon. And we have the yeoman farmer and the whole birth of democracy, and he's a so-called revolutionary. How do we understand the world in which we live in as Hamilton against Jefferson? Or what is the project called America? And what does Hamilton represent in that?
Well, I want to start where, riffing off something you've just said and thinking about Hamilton the musical. The line today that has touched me the most, Lawrence is in South Carolina redefining bravery. We won't be free till we end slavery. That Hamilton was about many things, but one of the things was about powerful friendships that helped him be his best self. Lawrence is a man who was born to a wealthy slave-owning family, but he chose to be one of America's staunchest abolitionists against his own self-interest. And I think that, to me today, we deal with the real, but we strive for the ideal. And that's Vanderbilt, and I hope that's America. Dealing with the real, striving for the ideal.
But we have a lot of people who've been turned off to politics, are going to be more disillusioned by politics, but yet, Hamilton, I don't know if he was just predisposed to being a citizen, but how do we understand, do you think the journey he's on as an immigrant, his background is an illegitimate, growing up in a slave culture, how does that translate into being what we would call politically active, to blow up the Articles of Confederation and to say, well, I'm going to do that with the Constitution, and then he arrives and he's giving speeches to overthrow the king. I mean, that's pretty strong as a college student.
As a very young man, he was doing this, your age.
Yeah.
Well, one, he was an autodidact. I mean, we're here at a university. One of the great secret powers of Hamilton was that he was an amazing reader. And he was a person who all of his life was becoming increasingly self-educated. So I think that this idea of this immigrant, and we are a nation, obviously a nation of immigrants, and I think this idea of who do we include, and I want to say just at this opening, that for me, like you, this is about love. And one of the things, my radical political act, and I think it was similar to Hamilton's radical political act, was wanting to love everyone in this country as an active part of loving this country.
Yeah, you're a writer, and Hamilton's an interesting character too, because he also goes through a terrible political attack on sex scandals and all of these charges against him. Do you think he was somebody that would really try to persuade by trying to understand in a serious way through reading what was in the head of the person that I knew was wrong, to say they were wrong? How does his being an autodidact and his voracious reading prepare him for what he really does, which is to say, I'm going to change America? But there are people that don't agree with that. There are people that, and he's a person of passion, he's a person of emotion. He eventually goes into a duel. How does he get the emotional, the passion side with reason working, do you think?
Well, it's interesting. Hamilton and Washington both have to work hard to govern their temperament, their tempers, and they worked on that a lot. I think that Hamilton, this role of friendships, his absolute passionate desire to know the other side of every argument. We've talked about, when we've been preparing this course on the Federalist Papers that we will be teaching over at Fisk, we've talked about the ways in which he looked at all sides of the argument, and that he had conversations with people who didn't agree with them. And I think that was key to part of that process. Today, I think this idea of the world turned upside down. That's one of the themes of the play of Hamilton. And we've just participated probably in the most unusual presidential election in our time. And one of the things that in Turnout's biography, he says, and I want to quote him here, Hamilton galvanized, inspired, and scandalized the newborn nation, serving as a flashpoint for pent-up conflicts of class, geography, race, religion, and ideology. Do you think that President-elect Trump did manage to do something like that, something similar?
Well, I think it's very interesting in the sense that Hamilton, when he's writing and advocating and proselytizing and arguing and maybe overstating things, he's always very, very passionate, but he has always, I'm going to be the voice of reason and facts and history. And I think one of the most remarkable things when we read the materials and we talk about these individuals is, first of all, it's kind of crazy how many of them went to college. And we're talking in 1787. And I think 2/3 of them attended a college. And we've gone backwards. 25, we've not moved the graduation rate of college up in America. Okay, so he's educated. And then he has this whole theory about, I know history, and it's always a great affront to me. He does not like the Greeks. And not in the way that I get criticized on campus for not being supportive of the Greek community. But what Hamilton struggles with is, and you see it in his writing, you see it even with Madison, who obviously Jefferson got to him later, they're afraid of democracy.
Absolutely.
I mean, they don't like demos. They don't like the Athenian democracy. It can become unmediated. It's passion, raw. And if you read Hamilton, and he writes beautifully, and he writes beautiful love letters too. He's full of passion and love. But he knows that humans are deeply flawed. And he is shocked at the founding after the revolution about, oh my God, how do you mediate between passion and faction and get reason? And so when I tell my students, I say, and I don't know that I'll be appointed to the Supreme Court in the next several years or be the Attorney General, but let's be really clear, when they did the Constitution, it had a lot of flaws. But one theory they had was nothing in that document allowed the people to act directly. So the president, crazy, I'm not a fan of the Electoral College, who won the popular vote? Right, so we have Electoral College. That was like, we don't want the people. So we're still living with that. And then we have the Senate. It was appointed. I mean, it wasn't until, I should know the amendment. Number 16 is the income tax. 17th. 19th is right to vote. 18th is a great experiment called prohibition, I believe. We need some mulligans once in a while. We need some mulligans once in a while. So, they weren't elected until the 20th century. And then you have the House, but you've divided control between an upper house and a lower house. The president's not elected, and they have a Supreme Court for life. And I'm like, okay, tell me where that's pure expression of will. And what they really were worried about was just the rush of passions. And it's fascinating because he never is, I'm surprised there are no citations really to the Bible. But he believes that we are really bad actors. I mean, he and Madison, like, people are self-interested and they're rapacious and they don't care about anything but themselves. That's pretty clear. They got a strong view. So he's like, all right, how do we cure for that? So the project is how you cured for it.
Exactly.
And I think what we saw yesterday was, okay, there was an election. What are the checks and balances, whoever gets elected in the system, that are mediating? And, I always think of governance, is it a mirror or is it a filter? So now we're going forward. So does policy just become a mirror of what that winning was? And that's the mirror. Or does governance now become Hamiltonian? Well, let's get a little filtering here. Let's get a little bit of cooling off here. Let's get a little bit of testing here. And I think the responsibilities are really there with the other branches of government to make the system work. And I hear a lot about, executive overreach and the active judiciary. It'll be really interesting to see how do the branches interact when you have somebody who's so harnessed, the people in that way, when the system really was designed to say, hey, let's maybe take a little bit kind of a break there.
I want to ask a different kind of question. You all got me introduced as a novelist, but I came here as a country songwriter. And I think that...
Right up my alley.
And I think that one of the things that's interesting to me as a writer thinking about this, and as a country songwriter, is that there seems to have been in this election a tremendous separation between heart and head. And that Trump made appeals to, in some sense, the heart of America, the passions of America, in simple language, and Hillary Clinton made appeals to the head of America. And how would, as we go forward, and one of the things about Alexander Hamilton is he integrated both of these things so well, and also had administrative genius. But how do we go forward and integrate heart and head together so that we've got the checks and balances of the three elements of government. But right now, a lot of people are working out of pain and fear, and other people are working out of facts. How do you think we integrate those?
Well, especially refer to the election, and I've decided that I will opine on the election, the results, because the pundits were so off. And so, it's kind of like, well, Alice, you and I might as well say what we think, because Nate Silver is now Nate Tin.
Yeah.
There's the kind of, sorry, okay. All right, get the hook, all right. But I find it shocking, and I love the university. I feel like I have privileges. I feel like I'm an educated person. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm in touch. I'm looking, I'm such an idealist. I'm looking at the map and I'm like, okay, well, this is interesting. And I'm like, what's my anchor here? It's like, okay, well, if I draw a line through every one of those states and every one of those little things and they're pushing the button, well, 10 people just showed up here. If so-and-so wins 3.5 of them, I'm thinking, how do you win a half vote? I thought, you know what, that maybe there's an opportunity Vanderbilt kid in every one of those. When I look at a blue state or a red state, I see beautiful potential. Absolutely. And so I think you should never give up, what are those hopes and dreams and aspirations?
Absolutely.
That I can look at that map, and maybe it's just I took a lot of optimism, or I'm reading positive psychology, but I look at that map and I said, okay, well, there's opportunity Vanderbilt all around there. Is that something that I feel is, creating our community? Heart and mind, heart and reason and passion. I think Hamilton's fascinating because, we don't read it in the class, and Dave Lewis is one of our political science professors. He's brilliant. He teaches a course on policy, governance. Hamilton, and Dave will frown, what do I know? I think he's like the person, he's the founder of American public administration. And the other thing I want to tell the students here is when you read the papers, this is really crazy, they write about designing governments like they're doing cell biology research. And so when Hamilton starts writing, he's like, there have been these new discoveries in governance. And he'll talk about Montesquieu. And so Hamilton is treating the project of transformation like a science. And my kids, I say, he was a pretty well-read guy. He didn't go to school a lot, and then he got a scholarship to Columbia. I always liked the story because, he got rejected at Princeton.
Yes.
So Columbia was his backup school. And who rejected him was Aaron Burr's father. Yeah. So Aaron Burr's father was the president of Princeton. So I'm kind of like, this person is really grinding on, I'm going to change the world. And yeah, I'm an immigrant. People say I'm illegitimate. And, people say and it's not true, but I'm of mixed race because I'm from the Caribbean, and you start putting the pieces of history together. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to outsmart him. I'm going to outread him. I'm going to argue them. And I think that was what just impresses me so much about his work. And, you know, he's citing these sources that are unbelievable. So there's clearly this political science. He's saying there's a new science. And then you read these papers, he's like, how do we pay the bills? And he's like obsessed with, I got to make this thing work, this project called governance. And I think those are absolutely remarkable foundations. And it's like, if you want to pick a fight with him, you better know your stuff. And I think that that's what really kind of overwhelms me, because he's much better read than I am. And I got Wikipedia going, it's like, okay, what war was that? Or, you know, who is that?
But he's a thinker and a doer, and actually that's one of the ways he reminds me of you. Because he was out in the war. He wasn't just a thinker. He's an amazing thinker, but he was a doer. He built the bank. He did things, as you have done with Opportunity Vanderbilt. But I think in this time, so I think that balancing of doing and thinking and rigorous thinking is just so key here. But I also think we're getting near to the end of our time, that this has been a hard day. I know personally, I've cried today. And I know I work today, and I'm thinking today. And tomorrow, I think it'll just end most importantly, loving today. I start off by saying I think that radical political love. And as you said, Hamilton was a great lover, maybe, of country and more.
Wow.
I always like that line about George Washington's wife named her tomcat after him. And that is a lesson from this particular election, that sometimes our private lives will not always be. But I do think that.
I think that's an interesting question, which is, you know, the guy's not exactly going to get the Boy Scout award, but yet, I mean, he's like really this great leader. So the whole personal, and of course now Jefferson, it's not like, you know, there's a lot of stories to be told about a lot of our founders.
And interesting, when we get into this more, that's the one place I disagree with Turnout. I think there is some research, there is some possibility, I don't want to talk about there now, about what Hamilton's background is.
Exactly.
But being here in Nashville, and with our strong relationships with Fisk, I actually wanted to take a moment at the very end, almost sort of like a benediction. I want to invite you to read together with me and any of our audience members who know it, a poem that I know that you love and care about, too.
Can I just implore, you know, the lesson of Hamilton is he really used his power of education and persuasion. And I know many of you, from whatever, I did a Q&A with the freshmen here on Monday. It's like, you know, these kids said, I don't know what what your political preferences are, so what do you think of politics in the election? And I just want to say, this is your big advantage, to be educated and propose solutions for the problems that aren't going to go away. And that's kind of what Hamilton did. He's like, this government ain't working. I'm going to Annapolis. And going to Annapolis was not easy to get to. So that's something I think that Hamilton, in the kind of worst moments of like, what is the use of an education? The second thing is, I want to implore you all as individuals to realize your agency as human beings to affect things. Because I think, you know, I hear it all the time, whether all these big machines, big data, it predicts what everyone does. And I'm kind of like, boy, we have no clue of understanding who we are, what we think. And people are just, well, if you just load up a lot of likes from Facebook, you make these predictions. So I just want to say, get personal, get connected, get individual, and build friendships.
That was his strength, these friendships and having hard conversations. His ability to get in the room where it happened was a room to get in the room where he made it happen, literally by connecting to people that were different than them. I talked to one of my friends in New York, my best friend in the world, in New York today, and she said, she's a retired investment banker, went to Harvard with me. She's a brilliant woman, went to St. Paul's Girls' School, Harvard, invented an interest rate swap. She actually always banked at the Bank of New York because it was Hamilton's bank. But she said to me, and she was calling me in the morning to get some wisdom from me, she said, I only know one person who voted for Trump. And I know that you know many. The night before the election, I was out with some good friends in Nashville. One of them had voted, was going to vote for Trump, had voted already. One of your great advantages here is, and whether you are a Trump person and you should know some Hillary people, or a Hillary person and know Trump people, and there are 2 other candidates out there, this country we will be our best selves the more people you know that are not like you. And the more profound conversations, the authentic, the real, not the polite listening, but the true engagement, saying what you really think. And we cannot be in any way so fragile that we can't hear what other people are saying, so that we can figure out what is our common cause, our common space, and move forward. Those conversations don't happen everywhere. I actually think this particular place, the Vanderbilt, because of the Commons specifically, the Commons is a place where I say the ends of the world meet. I know that I've had leadership in our house, because our students have invited them, we've had Republican and Democratic Congresspeople. So I knew that it was closer than my friends in New York, and that is your advantage at Vanderbilt. I had,
Let's read our poem.
Yes, read our poems.
Otherwise, we'll get voted off the stage. Okay. Tell them what the poem is, Alice.
Well, it's normally called Mother to Son, and today it's going to be called Professor to Students. And it's literally written by a family friend, and this is a friend of mine. We've been friends since our kids were in the kindergarten and 1st grade. So we're going to read this together. Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up. Oh my goodness. David, pull out of there. I can tell you, but I keep going. Does anyone know it? I keep going. Keep turning corners where there ain't been no light. So don't sit down here, honey, because you're kind of tired. Because I'm still going, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair.
You're the best. It was great, Alice.